Hello, listeners, and welcome to the fifth and final episode in a series of podcasts on the topic Equity, Diversity, and Technology, a Caribbean educator's perspective. Remember, if you are in training to become an educator, if you are already an educator, or even if you just have an interest in education, this podcast is for you. Over the last four episodes, we explored how technology can be used in the classroom to address issues of equity and diversity. In this final podcast, we will reflect on all we have discussed, draw some conclusions, and make some recommendations. In our first episode, we defined some key terms as well as explored how collaborative Web 2.0 tools such as Google Docs help to address equity and diversity in the classroom. As I reflect on my own use of these tools in the class, I must say that I have improved by leaps and bounds since I have started the doctoral program in teaching and learning with emerging technologies. I have mentioned in a previous episode that I was employed by a school where the Canvas learning management system and Zoom video conferencing software were used to connect students and teachers from the Caribbean, Canada, and North America. Initially, I grouped my students by territory simply because it was not as messy. In my mind, creating groups with students from different locations meant students emailing components back and forth, and it meant that I needed to give up my valuable planning time if students needed to meet on Zoom. You see, at that time, students were not allowed to use Zoom without staff supervision. However, as I settled into the doctoral program and became more aware of the importance of fostering diversity in the classroom and about the tools that were available, I started to make some changes to my virtual classroom and encourage the formation of multicultural groups. My classroom came alive before my eyes. I came to the realization that I had a prime opportunity to help my students learn to respect each other's cultural differences. Using Google Docs meant that my students could work together and share ideas without being logged on to Zoom. And best of all, my presence was not needed as they could work whenever they wanted. In the second episode, we turned our attention to online translators and caption assist. We focused on the plight of the many Venezuelans who found themselves seeking asylum in primarily English speaking territories and what this meant for access to education for them. To bring this closer to home, I'm currently working as an English as a second language online facilitator. The reality with my classes is that students are grouped in beginner, intermediate, and advanced categories. However, where equity is concerned, I quickly noticed that all beginners were not equal. Therefore, to level the playing field, I encourage the use of the online translator as well as captions where applicable. I do admit, though, that this is still quite a new endeavor, and as I go on, I will continue to reflect on how I can foster more equity in this setting. In episode 3, the focus was on personalized learning programs. And as I reflect on this tool, it is important to acknowledge that in the Caribbean, lack of funding for the majority of schools, which are government owned, is an obstacle. Therefore, while it would be wonderful for each student to be privy to this type of learning experience where content tailored for him or her was available at his or her fingertips, the reality is that this is simply not a cost effective option at this time. However, as we move into reflecting on episode 4, where we explored learning management systems, we know that we can use these information systems as a viable alternative to personalized learning software, where teachers are able to create a bank of content and assign this content to students based on their strengths and weaknesses. So, let's draw some conclusions and make some recommendations. 1. Teaching students to embrace diversity puts them in a position to embrace and respect global perspectives. This is an invaluable survival skill. According to UNESCO 2020, education systems need to recognize, value, and build on diversity. The understanding of inclusive education in policies, laws, and practices must broaden to target all students regardless of their identity, origin, or different abilities. 2. Addressing equity and diversity in the classroom in the Caribbean context is a tough job. There must be more support for teachers, especially in the form of teachers' assistants, training, and other resources. In fact, UNESCO 2020 states that teachers need more support to embrace diversity, and continuous professional development opportunities are often unavailable. There needs to be training specifically related to how to use technology to address equity and diversity in the classroom. Based on what I have learned in this course, even simple tools such as Microsoft Word feature tools which can be used to address different types of students. However, more exposure is needed. As I wrap up the series, I wish to acknowledge that I have received some valuable feedback from you, the listeners, and it was stated that while the podcasts were engaging, my voice is very soft. I did my best and made my best effort to project as best as I could. However, perhaps it is the background music that overpowers my voice. Therefore, it is my intention to remove the background music so that my voice can be highlighted. Dear listeners, as I make my final sign off for this series, as usual, I will leave you with some food for thought. Today's quote is from Verna Myers, who states that diversity is being asked to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. Let us take our students' hands and ask them to dance.